All right, Nick, let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle, great draft. This team is really coming into its own. A lot of turnover this offseason at some key positions, but there's one guy in particular Seattle has an approach with that I think is going to get some fast results and show that this team could be contenders very, very shortly. We'll get into that in just a second, but before we do, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. Right, Nick, as I alluded to, something interesting. The Seattle Seahawks have an approach, a method that they want to try with an important player. That's third-round pick quarterback Jalen Milroe to potentially fast-track him into being a quality NFL level starter. Let's get into this interesting article, and we'll talk more about it on the other side. This is from the Tacoma News Tribune, and it says, the Seahawks also see a passer who needs to develop in Milroe, and he knows he needs better balance, core, footwork, and other mechanics throwing the football. But then there is the speed of the NFL game plus its complex defenses. That's where VR comes in. The Seahawks are in the early stages of trying virtual reality with Milroe. They're borrowing the idea from what LSU's football performance staff did when Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy in college in 2023, and what the Commanders' offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury used with Daniels in his wondrous NFL rookie season of 2024. VR plays images of games and defenses for Daniels at a 1.75 time normal game speed. The idea is the user brain adapts to the faster speed of VR, thus processes decisions more quickly that make actual games slow down in the quarterback's mind, the opposite of what it normally does with younger QBs to the NFL. The VR system's German engineers estimate the quarterback using it gains somewhere between 250 to 300 extra mental reps per game week without the physical exertion. McDonald calls those cheap reps. So, does this matter? Is this important? Can it even do anything? And I think the only way for us to ever know if this would work is to go to the source. They talk about Jaden Daniels and see what it did for him and maybe compare him to somebody else in that program that did very, very well eventually in the NFL. So the first chart I have up here is PFF passing grades, and you see on the left-hand side is Joe Burrow, on the right-hand side is Jaden Daniels. In the blue is their PFF passing grade in college, and in the light blue is their NFL PFF passing grade. As we can see here, Joe Burrow nominally better than Jaden Daniels was in college, 94 to 92 PFF passer grading. Both very, very talented, very, very proficient college quarterbacks. Then on the right-hand side in the light blue shows their NFL first year one, their PFF grade for year one rookie season of the NFL. And you can see there's a drop-off on both sides. But Jaden Daniels' drop-off is noticeably less than Joe Burrow's by a significant margin. I actually have that broken out separately here so we can see just a drop-off here to give you the idea of actually 18 points of drop-off for Joe Burrow here on the left-hand side versus 8 points of drop-off for Jaden Daniels here. So what does that mean? It means that this method, what they're able to do, the marvel of modern technology, has gotten guys who are physically gifted quarterbacks at the college level to come in and get their mental game up to speed with the NFL faster. There's less drop-offs. There's less, time on the field that you need. You can get those extra reps in every week without breaking your body down. I think it's a really interesting concept here, and I think it's something that Jalen Milroe, phenomenal, gifted athlete, great with his legs, great arm strength, a very talented quarterback. Where is his breakdown and processing in the mental game? Can he get through his reps? That is what they need to work on, and this is the perfect thing for the Seahawks to use on him. I think this could help him develop and transition to the NFL much faster than he would normally be able to do. I know it was a lot, Nick. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one, but before we get to you, Seattle fans, in the comment section below, let us know, what are your thoughts on this VR method? I show you the proof kind of. I know it's a one-off type of thing, but it's very early on in this system. Do you think that this method will work? Do you think it'll speed Jalen Milroe up into being transitioning, being ready for that NFL game any sooner? Do you think it's a bunch of hullabaloo? You don't believe it. You want the traditional methods are the only methods that are good with you. Let us know in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this interesting latest news out of Seattle?
So I think it's an absolutely genius move by the Seattle Seahawks coaching staff for really two reasons. The first reason is that it aligns with what Milroe needs to improve on, right? Reading NFL defenses, getting used to pocket progressions, understanding schemes and things like that. At the University of Alabama, he was obviously a very prolific, successful passer, but he was more of a runner first in a lot of situations, at least for most of his career, became a better passer towards the end. But he still is kind of newer in the advanced level passing department, giving him this VR, this hyper speed, just exposure to all this high level training content should hopefully accelerate his growth in terms of becoming an elite professional passer. At least that's the goal. But I think the second point here the Seattle Seahawks are using here, and here is where I think it's really smart. It allows them to evaluate much earlier how good Jalen Milroe could possibly be. Because we talked about it earlier this offseason, as everyone's very well aware of at this point. The Seahawks, of course, signed Sam Darnold to be their short-term starting quarterback. But the way the deal is structured, they could move off of Sam Darnold and save money after year one. And they definitely, based on the contract, will move off of him or at least drastically alter their situation after year two. So basically, the Seahawks have to figure out if after 2025, is Milroe the guy? And if not, they're going to have to go out and draft another quarterback either this next offseason or trade for a guy or sign a different guy. Because the way the contract is structured, Darnold's not going to be there in Seattle past 2026. So if you look at what the Seahawks have done here, is they basically are exposing Jalen Milroe through virtual reality here the opportunity to learn as much as he possibly can about NFL defenses, scheme strategies. So that way, when they see him in practice and they see him in preseason and they see him over the course of the regular season, they will know no later than basically February of 2026 if Milroe can handle being an NFL quarterback. They're basically accelerating the evaluation timeframe, which is absolutely brilliant, right? One of the problems when it comes to any sort of quarterback evaluation is that teams take forever to figure out if a guy's any good, right? The New York Giants had Daniel Jones for a long time, and he'd have flashes here or there, but everyone was like, we don't think he's that good, but give him another year. And then you have a halfway decent year, and they'd be like, well, maybe give him another year. And then he was terrible, and finally people realized, hey, he's not very good. The Steelers had a similar problem with Kenny Pickett. He had some flashes, he had some moments, so they stuck with it a little while before they eventually realized, hey, he's not very good. The reality is the quarterback position is so tough to evaluate, and it is so critical to get right. Obviously, everyone understands that. The Seattle Seahawks here understand how important it is, and that's why they want to get Jalen Milroe basically force-fed all this information, force-fed all this training, so that way when the ball goes live, either in practice, preseason, or if he has to play in the regular season for whatever reason, he is fully prepared to be just mentally up to speed to be an NFL quarterback. And at that point, the Seattle Seahawks coaching staff can fairly efficiently and effectively evaluate his performance and then go into the 2026 offseason with a better idea of what they need to do at that position, whether it's lining up behind Jalen Milroe or going after somebody else. This is a great job by Seattle, setting themselves up for long-term success.
Yeah, Nick, and I think what you bring up is important because development of Milroe as a quarterback is going to be paramount for this team going forward. A lot of people say, when you hear Clint Kubiak and you hear what he's done with the Saints, are they going to unleash Jalen Milroe in some, Taysom Hill type of package? And that, to most people, it makes sense. That seems like the obvious choice early on to do that. But from Mike McDonald's own mouth himself, this could be a little bit of a smokescreen potentially, but I don't think so. He says they are not going to do that. He said he's going to be trained to play quarterback for us. When he's in there, he's going to be playing quarterback, but the athleticism is going to come to life when he is on the field. They're going to let it be natural. They're not going to force him into some gadget type of roles, do anything like that, but they're wanting, ready, and willing for Jalen Milroe to develop into a quarterback for them. There's an obvious connection between Kubiak and Hill and what they did, but they see Milroe as the quarterback of this team. And to me, when you hear things like that, if this guy wasn't your quarterback of the future and it was just a guy that you're like willing to spend a flyer on to see if it worked, you'd say, okay, we'll throw him in any situation we can get out of him. We'll put him on the field, do whatever we can to get some value out of this person until we can evaluate them. But if it's a guy through the evaluation process, through everything, you see as your potential future starting quarterback, franchise quarterback, you don't want to risk injury. You don't want to risk anything like that. Obviously, Taysom Hill has gotten injured in that role numerous times. I think that they're hinting here that we see Jalen Milroe as a guy that is our future franchise quarterback. We want to get him there as fast as humanly possible. This new method, the VR method of going through, the reads and everything, the progressions of reading the defense, everything like that as quickly as possible, something we're trying to implement to speed that process up. And by coming out and saying, hey, we're not going to implement them in these gadget packages. We're going to put them on the field as a quarterback, and we're going to let the magic happen from there. I think it's a really interesting move by the Seahawks, and I really like what they're doing here with Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, and just a final point to really end on, and you hit on something there important, is that they would not do this if they actually weren't trying to use Milroe and evaluate him to see if he is their long-term answer at quarterback, right? So they're not doing this just out of willy-nilly, just for, giggles and grins. They say, listen, we drafted this kid because we think he has a chance to become an elite franchise quarterback to take us to the next level. We're going to give him every opportunity to be successful. And that's another point to really harp on here. We see a lot of teams, most teams, right? They talk about giving a quarterback the tools for success, especially a young quarterback when they draft a guy. They always say, at least platitudinally, we want to give him everything he can to be successful. Coaches, right? We want to surround him with weapons and all this kind of thing, right? Protect him in the media if need be. Everyone always wants to talk about it. Let's give credit to the Seattle Seahawks leadership for taking it a whole nother level and going just beyond the cliche stuff, right? I always love franchises, and then they come and go sometimes, but they think outside the box and are willing to do things a little differently to give their players the best chance of success. Because Milroe getting this extra dose through this VR process and everything they're doing through that gives him the best chance of success too, right? Like I mentioned, it gives the Seattle Seahawks organization a great chance to evaluate him very early on in the process before they decide which direction they have to go. But it also allows Jalen Milroe to be mentally prepared and be put in a great situation for him personally to succeed. And franchises that usually win, they are focused primarily on allowing their players to succeed. It sounds cliche. It sounds like, well, of course, but the reality is, if you go through most teams, certainly losing teams, they do what they've always done, right? They bring in coaches and they say, well, all we need to do is change our playbook. All we need to do is just go from a certain personnel package or something like that. The reality is, it's a culture thing. You have to set up your players to be successful players, right? You have to develop them. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to put them in positions to win football games, to make plays to help you win football games. And let's give a lot of credit to the Seattle Seahawks for willing to go a unique step, for looking outside of their organization, looking to other quarterbacks in other teams, other programs. Hey, what worked for them to grow and develop and evaluate the quarterback position? They looked at LSU, they looked at Washington, they saw Jane Daniels, and they said, listen, there's something here. We are going to attack this and use everything we can. We're not going to sit here and be, prideful and say, well, that's not how we did things before. That's not how we did things in New Orleans, if you look at Clint Kubiak or whatever. Instead, they say, hey, let's think outside the box. Let's use what Clint Kingsbury did, a smart guy, a good former NFL quarterback, guy who knows this stuff. Let's look at what they did. Let's borrow from them and apply it to our situation. So just in conclusion here, it is a really creative, smart move by the Seattle Seahawks organization for all the reasons we outlined, but it also was a great move to allow Jalen Milroe to succeed as well. So no matter how you slice it, this was a really smart strategy by the Seattle Seahawks.